All right, let's welcome into the pod. You know him well. He's been on here before. He's been on TV for, well over a decade. He's crushing it with the Bear Bets podcast, college football guy, and most importantly, a huge Jets fan. Chris
Oh
Fallica,
yeah.
how you doing, Chris?
Oh, we're doing fantastic as now the Joe Douglas era has been ushered into and yeah, I guess you can only miss on what two quarterbacks in the draft and then signing Aaron Rodgers in that trade and
Yeah.
ultimately see it through. He had some good picks, he had some gems, but at the same time, the name of the game is find your franchise
Yeah.
quarterback and so for three.
Yeah, as a Jets fan, it's been a tough going. Another year, no playoffs. I know everybody thinks of you as college football, but you are a big time Jets fan. And Chris, I
Oh,
gotta say, this Woody Johnson report that he was coming to everybody and saying, "Hey, we're benching the safety this week." Like, I mean, you just hear that and you're just like, "Oh my! Can I take up a collection so we could get a group to own the Jets?" Because this is unacceptable.
good organization start at the top. And I guess the parallel you can make NFL style is what Daniel Snyder and the Washington football team,
Mm,
Commanders, Redskins, whatever it was for his tenure there. That's what it was. He was known as a kind of a meddling owner and getting involved in decisions that he probably had people that he hired who were qualified to make those decisions and they didn't. Now you got if these reports are true about Woody Johnson and wanting to bench Aaron Rodgers, like stay out of the way. And I guess if you're a Jets fan, look, any hope and optimism as a Jets fan is a very, very dangerous thing. But I guess there's the possibility. I mean, he was the ambassador to the UK in Trump's first term. Maybe
mm.
he goes back over there. Maybe he sees some control of the team to you bring in some football people, and he's kind of out of sight, out of mind, and maybe you can get this turned around. But I mean, it's going to be hard. I mean, you don't have a good cap situation. I mean, I would be shocked if Aaron Rodgers was back at quarterback next year. Tyrod Taylor certainly isn't a long-term answer. You're going to have to ante up and pay Brees Hall and Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson. Like, not a good situation right now, especially in a division where you've got one of the head dogs of the AFC and the Bills, and who knows what you're going to get. It looks like the Patriots may have their franchise quarterback.
Yeah.
Tua staying healthy now, hopefully for the Dolphins, and doesn't look like a great situation for Gang Green.
Yeah, it's crazy. They won that stupid game against the Rams like 5 years ago that cost them Trevor Lawrence. And then last year with Zach Wilson, once Rodgers went down, you're like, oh, well, we'll be awful. And Zach Wilson and the defense kept them in games. They win 7, I think. So you don't have a super high pick. Couldn't get a quarterback in a pretty stacked quarterback draft, apparently. And now Chris, you're a college football guy. You look at this year's crop. It's like, okay, everybody loves Shador. I like Cam Ward. I don't know if everyone else is as high on him as me. And then it's
Yeah,
like Quinn Ewers, Jalen Milrow. I don't. When you look at the quarterbacks for this draft, do you see anyone that jumps out at you?
I would imagine Shador will be the number one pick and the first quarterback
Yeah.
off the board, but I'm not sure Cam Ward is
No.
the guy in the NFL. A guy, I mean, Carson Beck certainly has been turning the ball
Oof.
over a ton this year. Quinn Ewers certainly has not had. I don't think it is a great quarterback class. I think you unfortunately are probably going to see teams reaching for these guys, thinking we need a quarterback, we got to get one. When in actuality, there may not be one available for them. So it's a bad year, I think, to potentially need a quarterback unless you're a team that you have your quarterback and you're picking number one. I don't know how ultimately it's going to play out. Who's going to get the number one pick? But if you're bad and you don't need a quarter, maybe like if the Patriots somehow get the number one pick, you can probably get a haul for that pick. Someone who's going to take Shadur. So yeah, bad year to need a quarterback.
Yeah. Now I'm just curious on Shador as we pivot to college football. You've seen him a lot.
Mhm.
I just wonder. There's a lot of hype around him, obviously, but is this one of these like there's not a lot of great options, but Shador's pretty damn good. And then, there's the Dion stuff that's lurking out there where, listen, man, if he goes to, whatever team, it's pretty safe to assume that Dion's probably not far behind, right? Would you agree with that or no?
I would disagree.
Oh,
Being out in Colorado this past weekend with Big U and kickoff, I think the sense out there, if you talk to people around that program and on the coaching staff, is that he's going to see it out another year. Because
hmm.
I think he hears that narrative, and I think he's out to prove people wrong. And kind of there for a little bit of a longer time. I think I'd watch. I would think the kid, Julian Lewis, the kid who just decommitted from SC and has been all over the place. I think there's a good chance he could wind up in Boulder next year as the starting quarterback. But yeah, I think Shadur is by far the best of a group of quarterbacks that aren't great. I was listening actually on Todd McShay's podcast earlier or last week when he was kind of going over the quarterbacks, and he kind of echoed the same thing. Like uh, Shaduri is really good here. His strengths, he's not as fast necessarily as you think. Maybe his arm isn't as strong as you normally think, but at the same time, he's playing behind an offensive line that isn't necessarily great right now, and he's kind of having to do a lot of things on his own. So yeah, I would not. I don't necessarily buy all of this Deion Sanders to the Cowboys or Florida State or whomever in the NFL should that team wind up drafting Shador.
Yeah. It's interesting. You're I believe, did you go to Miami?
I did.
Right. So you've seen Cam Ward a lot. I'm sure
Mhm.
you've wagered on him a lot. Every time I look at this guy, he's making phenomenal plays. Now, I don't know exactly the extent of what he's working with, offensive line, receivers, but it did your mention of the kid at Georgia, Carson Beck. So he had Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey last year, and he kind of looked like a first round pick.
Yep.
They're now on to the NFL and they're crushing it. And
Sure.
all of a sudden, Carson Beck doesn't look great. So, how much of it is context? And does Cam Ward have any dudes in Miami with him?
Cam Ward has some guys at Miami. Xavier Estrepo is a really good wide receiver. Has been there a while. They've got some tight ends that are really good and athletic. He's got an offensive line that Mario Cristobal has built up. His line's pretty good. I think the knock on Cam is he has a tendency to hold the ball a little bit too long, which is the same kind of knock that people have on Shadur Sanders. And he always seems to make a couple of throws during the course of the game, back across your body on the run that gets picked off or could have been picked off. He had a play at the end of the Georgia Tech game where he held the ball forever, had a chance to get rid of it, fumble, end of game. So he always seems to have a game or two where he's making a couple of plays that ultimately end in a turnover and poorly for his team. I'm not sure arm strength questions about him. Offenses that he's been running in college, these very like pass heavy, kind of quick throw, kind of offenses that he's been running. I think that maybe have a little bit of a knock against him as well. Look, I'm not saying that he can't go on and have a great NFL career. Any of these guys can't, but I try and weigh it in the sense that these guys are going to probably go higher than they should, and their career and their success is going to be weighed and judged against them potentially being a first or a second round pick as opposed to the type of grade that they probably should have, which is more of like a third or a fourth round pick.
And somebody's going to go to the Titans who stink. Somebody's going to unfortunately go to the Browns or the Raiders, and you're probably going to have no chance. And it's going to be tough. But let's go to college football. I've got the and listen, I'm not one of the I do like the phony outrage that I'm seeing, Chris, among the top 12 so far, and Tennessee's been left out and Indiana's in. I'm just going to let you riff for a second on, did anything really tick you off, or do you hate like the online discussion that surrounds this playoff?
I don't hate the online discussion around it because that's why they reveal these rankings every week. It's for the rank. Ultimately, these rankings mean nothing right now. And that was my takeaway from Tuesday night. Everything gets reset, reordered, and a little bit more solidified after we get the result in Columbus on Saturday between Indiana and Ohio State. I think people who are outraged right now that Texas doesn't have a win over a ranked team and they're ranked third and they got beat on their home field by 2 touchdowns against Georgia in a game that really wasn't super competitive. Penn State's only win against a ranked team is against Illinois on their home field in kind of an ugly game. Indiana's faced the 106th schedule in the country and they have no losses. Like, I think the committee has played it very safe right now in a sense that they've really just kind of loss ordered. And once we get the result, like Indiana is like the paper ceiling at 5. Like once we know whether that ceiling is legit or if that piece of paper has kind of been busted through this week in Columbus, then we're going to see the movement with these 2-loss SC, Alabama, Ole Miss, Georgia, Tennessee. Like what happens then? That's when we're going to find out where this committee goes. But it feels like this committee is just kind of right now taking the easy road out, playing it conservative. Let's just rank them by losses. We'll give them their due. They've won their games, and almost hoping that this thing just plays out where they don't have to make a difficult decision like a different committee did last year, leaving Florida State out once Alabama won the SEC. So I'm curious to see what happens in Columbus this week. And should Indiana pull the upset, I mean, that's a massive story, and that will send Ohio State on the road in the first round of the playoffs, because I mean they'll still be in the playoff at 10-2 with that win over Penn State. But I think a couple of things that you can potentially look towards that might shake this thing up a little bit. What happens if Texas goes to Texas A&M in a couple of weeks and they lose? We think Texas is good. We think their defense is elite, but the resume isn't really going to hold water against a lot of teams. At 10-2 Texas might be in trouble. What happens?
So wait, hold on, Chris. What is Texas's best win right now? Is it
Vanderbilt?
Right now it's Vandy. So that's not as good as Ohio State's win at Penn State, right?
No, not at all. I mean, as much of a doubt as I have about Penn State and kind of the hollow calorie wins that they have, it's still a really good defense. Their backs are good. They did go on the road and beat SC. They do have a win over a ranked team against Illinois. I mean, they're a good team, but I don't necessarily think they're the number 4 team in the country. But like, what happens if Texas loses? Like, do they fall behind out of the top 12 completely? What about Alabama? The Alabama-Tennessee discussions. Like, Tennessee beat Alabama early in the year. Like, what happens if Alabama wins in Norman this week? They win the Iron Bowl.
But when they win in Norman.
Really
interesting. Are you on Oklahoma?
I like OU this week, plus the points. And
how much are they getting?
They're getting 13.5 is what it's at now.
Interesting.
I got 14 a couple of days ago, and it's moved to 13.5. And that's what I've had to go with. But Alabama struggled moving the ball on a really good defense at South Carolina. They struggled moving the ball at Neyland Stadium against a really good defense at Tennessee. This is still a proud blue blood program in Oklahoma, led by a head coach who gets very emotional, could use that motivational chip about people talking about his job security. They did a really good job defensively on a good Ole Miss offense a couple of weeks back. Would not surprise me at all to see OU hang in there. But assume Alabama does win, like they should. They win the Iron Bowl. They win the SEC championship. Tennessee beat them. And, like, I don't know how you could put, like,
Tennessee beat them at home, right?
They did win home, and it was an ugly type game, and Alabama couldn't stop Tennessee on third down. But they did win the game, and like how the committee would judge that 10-2 Tennessee with a win over an SEC champion Alabama, who's going to probably be at that point be ranked 3rd or 4th against an Indiana team, which depending on how they fare, if they lose this weekend, like that'll be a very interesting conversation. And then I think the other couple of things that could potentially blow this up or create a good bit of discussion would be what happens if Army happens to shock us all this week and beat Notre Dame?
No way. Oh my God. Are you on the Irish or Army this weekend?
I like Notre Dame this week.
Okay. Yeah. I am as well.
I do too. But this is what we do on Twitter and social media and all these podcasts. We talk about it's hypotheticals. And this is why, like I said, why they do it. Army beats Notre Dame this week. Army beats Tulane in the AAC championship game. They're going past Boise State, right? Like,
wow. Oh, that's. I haven't thought to that. We got it. First of all, let's see if they can even be competitive with the Irish, who I think kind of wax them. But let me go back to this Indiana game. Do style points matter? So Indiana's the 13-point dog. If they show well and score a late touchdown and lose 33-30, they couldn't get the onside kick. That's a good showing.
Oh,
is that good enough?
That's go. It's that, in my opinion. That's absolutely good enough. And I think if you're Indiana, you can take a couple of things that have happened in recent days and weeks to feel pretty good about your chances of going in there and competing. Look, I was there in Columbus when Nebraska had multiple chances to take a lead and potentially win that game, had goal-to-go situations and couldn't score a touchdown, or else the outcome of that game would have been different. Ohio State losing their left tackle against Oregon. Then you wind up losing your center McLaughlin yesterday to a torn Achilles. Like, that was the one area that Ohio State couldn't afford to lose someone. And now you lose the anchor of your offensive line 3 days before the biggest game of the season for you. That's not a good thing. Indiana's front is pretty good
Mm.
in stopping the run. So we'll see if Ohio State can kind of tinker with that offensive line, which looked so good against Penn State a couple of weeks ago. But I think there's going to be that group of people that automatically want to compare scores to, hey, Indiana beat Nebraska, what, 52-7 or
Okay,
whatever.
all right.
And
But
then you
so I
got,
just looked at that Ohio State Nebraska game. It was basically a sandwich spot. You're coming off the Oregon loss,
mhm,
right? Then you have a bye, then it's Nebraska, then it's Penn State. So it was
yep,
like they were clearly looking ahead to Penn State, kind of played with their food. I, you make a good point that Indiana smoked Nebraska, but it's not it's not quite apples to apples, is it?
no, no, I don't think it is at all. And that was what I was going to ultimately
Okay, okay.
say was that like it's always dangerous to compare these scores.
Yeah.
But what the one, like, I would have liked Indiana's chances here much better before the Michigan game. Like
Yes,
if you
yes, yes.
watch the Michigan game against Indiana, Michigan's like the most like NFL prospect body team that Indiana has played so far. They couldn't move the ball on Michigan. And that's what ultimately worries me in a game that might be a bad weather game if Curtis Rourke can't throw. Are they going to be able to run and move the ball on? And they need 2 yards on 3rd and 2. Can they get it on the ground if they can't throw? If they're running on first down, can they avoid falling behind the sticks? Because
Hmm.
that's ultimately the issue that I have. Like, this is an Ohio State team that talent wise, prospect wise, is better than Michigan and far better than Indiana. But hey, that's why we play the games. Upsets happen, but that would worry me if I'm an Indiana fan, just how much trouble you had against Michigan moving the ball. And now you are playing a better defense this week on their home field.
So like Tennessee versus Indiana, right? So let's say Indiana loses and they lose by 20 and they
Mhm.
drop out. Tennessee slides in. And you look at Tennessee's resume and it's like, okay, close loss to Arkansas right before their big rivalry game against Tennessee, Florida.
On the last play of the
Um,
game.
yep. A respectable loss to Georgia. You know, it's Georgia. Come on.
Yep.
Tennessee seems like they're in really good shape. They still play UTEP and Vandy, unless they you totally vomit all over themselves against Vandy. They should Tennessee should be in, right?
I would think so. I mean, that's how I would vote in that room
Yeah.
and pick and order these teams. But it's funny, we talk about narrowing it down right now, like Indiana versus Tennessee and such. You and I have been following this sport, and we
Yeah.
bet on this stuff long enough to know that something is going to happen out there that we're not seeing coming. Alabama losing at Oklahoma, Ole Miss losing at Florida, A&M losing at Auburn, Auburn maybe winning the Iron Bowl. Some type of result
Something
out
wacky.
there
Yeah.
is going to happen that kind of is like, oh, wow, I didn't expect that. And that's
Mm.
going to throw another monkey wrench into everything and kind of have us rethinking and reorder everything out there.
I am just curious. Are we in a year where there's nobody great? There's no dominant
Yes.
team. Like in the last 5 years, I feel like Chris. There's Michigan was dominant last year. I mean, they were
Right.
really freaking good.
So was Georgia.
Georgia was really dominant. Georgia for a couple of years has been dominant. I look. I don't want to offend Jeff Schwartz here. I don't think Oregon is great.
No,
Right.
they're not.
I look at them. They're good. They're fine. They're good. Unimpressive against Wisconsin. Whatever. Throw it out. Fine. They've been good against other teams. I thought Ohio State outplayed them. In Oregon, I mean, you could say it was a toss up, fine, but
Mhm.
like Oregon's won, but I don't think they're amazing. I
No.
honestly still think Ohio State's the best team, and they're in a great spot at 5, right?
And yes, and that's one of the crazy things too. Like with the way the rankings were on Tuesday night, you've got Boise State at 4 as a as a team getting a potentially in a bye. So you could potentially have Ohio State playing a Big 12 champion in a 5-12 game, whether it's Colorado, BYU, Arizona State, playing a home game against a Big 12 championship and then playing Boise at a neutral site. Like the 5 seed is going to be like the second or third
Yep.
choice to wind up winning the title. But you're right. Before the year started, I assumed, and I think a bunch of people did, that it was kind of Ohio State and Georgia versus the field. And I think as the year has gone on, we've kind of seen Georgia kind of disappoint and lose a couple of games. And they've looked great when they've needed backs against the wall at Texas, backs against the wall against Tennessee. They provided a performance that made us remember this is why we thought Georgia was the best team in the country. And the same with Ohio State. Like they sputtered at Oregon. The injuries in the game against Nebraska was a flat spot. But when they had to go on the road and they had to have it against Penn State, they didn't allow an offensive touchdown. But I think the list of like teams that can win the national title, I think we're probably looking at 5, maybe 6.
Huh? Is Notre Dame in there?
Notre Dame is not in there for me.
So let me try to guess. I would Oregon, Texas, Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama. Is Miami in there for you?
No, Ole Miss.
Ole Miss. Interesting.
I think Ole Miss is going to be, you know how in Selection Sunday during the tournament, you always get that one trendy team, that other team you don't want to face in your bracket. Watch out for. That's going to be Ole Miss in a couple of weeks from now. When you see where they fall in your bracket, they're going to be the team that nobody wants to play because of Jackson Dart at quarterback and Trey Harris likely getting healthy and being able to play in a defensive line that's really, really good. The team I'm kind of on the fence with in that group of 6 is Texas. Because, like I said, they don't have a win.
A lot of people are fading Texas all of a sudden, huh?
I took them a couple of days ago at plus 680 to miss the playoff, just in case they go to College Station and lose. And you're looking at that resume. They're not going to win a resume battle with anyone, but without a win over anybody good. Just like Indiana doesn't have a win over anybody good. And Penn State right now, their resume is lacking. But Texas, like if you're look, it's not always resume. At some point, discussion should be who are the best 11 teams, because you got to include the group of 5 in there to make it the 12th.
Yeah.
At some point, if you say Indiana or Texas or whomever, they're one of the best 11 teams. They're one of the best at-large candidates out here. They're going in. Okay, that's fine. But in terms of a resume, their resume isn't going to beat very many people, if any, at all. So in case things get crazy and they go to College Station and lose, sure, why not throw a little pizza money on a plus 700 dog?
It's funny that you say that. I just pulled up the SEC standings. So Ole Miss is 6th in the SEC, but you do think that there's some value in them. Now, are they in trouble at Florida this weekend? I would assume no. I don't think I bet the game yet.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Did Florida give them and Billy Napier a ton of credit? Because I think people thought by Halloween Billy Napier was going to be fired.
That's right, yeah.
And they went to DJ Lagway, and he has played better. And you could make a case that if he did not get hurt against Georgia, maybe they beat the Bulldogs in Jacksonville that day. And then they came out and they beat LSU for a great win. I just wonder, though, that Ole Miss front and that defense, that front 7, is really good. And I think it's ultimately going to be tough for Florida to move the ball consistently against Ole Miss. Now, maybe they get a couple of big plays here and there, but I do think Ole Miss ultimately will escape Gainesville with the win. Maybe it won't be easy. Maybe they won't win by double digits and cover that big number. But Florida's going to give them a game.
You mentioned Ole Miss. We didn't really talk about Jackson Dart among the quarterbacks potential for the NFL. I haven't seen enough of him, and I know he's a 4-star, Gatorade Player of the Year and all that fun stuff. And he started at USC. But is this more of, hey, man, when you play with a coach like Lane Kiffin, you're going to put up insane numbers? Because there was a guy, Matt Corral, a couple years ago. Remember, he put up huge numbers, got hurt before the bowl game. I don't even think he's in the league. What's your read on Dart as a pro?
I think he'll get some looks. I mean, look, I am not someone who thought Bo Nix was going to go on and have a good rookie year at all, and he has proved me absolutely wrong. And I wonder if maybe there is some similarities with a veteran player who's been to a couple of different programs now and worked in a couple of different systems and gotten the experience. He's older, he's more mature. Maybe that will bode well for him. I mean, if he falls into the right system and the right situation, sure, why not? I mean, this is the conversation that I think NFL GMs and coaches and front office people are going to have when it comes to these quarterback classes. Are you better off? Do you want to take a Carson Beck in late round 1 or early round 2, or you take a Jackson Dart a little bit later and you work on other areas of your team first? So that I'm
Interesting.
certainly not opposed to a team taking a shot on Jackson Dart day two.
All right, real quick, last question is NFL related because I totally forgot. There's one line this week that I don't know what to make of it, and that's the reeling Niners getting points in Green Bay. San Fran has been favored all season in every game, and now here they are, dogs in Green Bay. Bit of a revenge spot after the playoff game last year. I did see Kittle say he's playing.
Mhm.
It sounds like Bosa probably a no go. Brock
Ward.
Purdy's digged up. This feels like a must-win game for Shanahan. You go 5-6, and they got the Bills next week. It's starting to feel like it's over for them. No playoffs. But
No,
I'm just curious. Anything on Packers Niners, a game that I don't understand.
I would look. I have been a Niners backer for a lot of this season. Uh, Probably too much my own doing. But yeah, this is an absolute must win for them. At the same time, I don't know how good Green Bay is. What have they got? 4 wins, I think, at the gun this year.
Yeah,
Like on the final play,
something
uh,
like that.
Jordan Love has a tendency to turn the ball over quite a bit. Is Ward back this week?
Unclear.
Niners?
He's got the personal. They haven't really given much light
Yeah,
on
I know he
what the
had.
heck's going on.
Yeah, well, yeah, I know they had the tragedy, which is awful. Um, but I might go back to the well one more time.
Hmm.
If this hits 3, I will absolutely grab
Yeah.
3 in San Francisco, just because Kittle playing, I think would be a big boost for them, especially if Purdy's shoulder isn't great. I mean, I think if I remember correctly, I think he popped up on the injury report with this at some point last year as well.
Oh.
So we'll see. I am still a believer in the Niners, even though I'll tell you what, as good of a play caller and offensive mind that Kyle Shanahan is viewed as, man, he makes some questionable decisions in terms of game management. Like that 4th and 6 at the
I
what
saw.
42 like you get with all those weapons, you get 6 yards on a middling defense in the league, the game's over.
Yeah.
It took Seattle 2 plays to get back to that line of
Yeah.
scrimmage, that 27-yard punt. Like
Unbelievable.
he cautious Kyle can't help himself, and between that and then giving games away against the Cardinals and the Rams, they've dug themselves a hole.
Mm.
Now they have the talent ultimately to play themselves out of it, but we'll see if that happens. A loss this week, and they are done because
Yeah.
there's no way they're making a wild card at that point, and the tiebreakers now in that division would not be great. So
Yeah.
I guess do or die. One of my buddies always says, it's a must-win situation. Well, if you're in a must-win situation, you must not be that good. So we'll see what happens in
Yeah.
Atlanta there on
You
Sunday.
know, they lose Ayuk. McCaffrey's missed more than half the season. Everybody's hurt after the suit. They've had such a run the last
Yep.
like 3 years.
So much
It's like
football.
the NBA team that goes to the finals 2 or 3 years in a row. You know that those extra 60 playoff games are going to wear you down. In the next season, it's going to be tough. I don't know if they can do it, but I do want to back the Niners here. It's just, yeah, I'm as cowardly as Shanahan is when he comes to, well, he can't trust his special teams because the
Well,
kicker is a train wreck.
hey,
Um,
hey.
yeah, so it's been a tough go. Anyways, positive thoughts to our Jets. And obviously, Fallica, enjoy Columbus, the big game.
Well,
You'll be there this weekend with Big Noon. And make sure you guys download the Bear Bets podcast. A lot of winners on there. Keep crushing it, Chris. Thanks, man.